Welcome to English with Mr. Harding, and thank you so much for checking us out, for joining us here for today's lesson. I hope that you find this useful and I hope that you find this helpful. I thought it'd be good to give you a little bit of information about me and just let you know where I come from and what my experience is. I've been a teacher for over 15 years. I've taught in high school all of those years and every single key stage 3, key stage 4 and key stage 5. And I've also pioneered some teaching and learning strategies in some of the schools that I've been part of. And more recently, I've also been marking for the exam board AQA. So that's just a little bit about me so you can kind of gain a sense of where I come from. And just doing something like this, English with Mr. Harding, has been something I've been considering and dreaming and thinking about for quite a while. And I want to welcome you to today's lesson and this series in actual fact, which I'm calling I'd Like to Get Better At. Now, I wonder if you've ever had this experience before, when a teacher has perhaps introduced a new concept and you've had a chance to practice it in lesson, but then you've had this thought afterwards because they moved on and you're just like, oh, do you know what? I'd really like to get better at, and then whatever that thing was. Well, the good news is that every single one of these videos is aimed towards that. It's giving you that opportunity to actually go over that concept, go over that skill, and so that you can actually turn the desire of I want to get better at into actually mastering that particular skill so that you can confidently apply it no matter what it is that you are reading, which is exciting. And so let me say as well, let me explain a little bit about how each session is going to run. In each session, we're going to be exploring a different concept, a different skill, whether it's in reading, whether it's in writing. I'll then teach you that. I'll walk you through that skill and then model the thinking process that goes on behind that. Because often I find, and having taught for a number of years, that it's difficult for people. That sometimes when a brand new concept is introduced, it's not necessarily that maybe they don't even understand the concept. It's just that the thinking process and the neural pathways that actually underpin that process haven't actually formed in the students' minds yet. So I want to give you plenty of opportunity to understand what the thinking process is behind this skill so that you can practice it too. And then I'm going to practically apply that skill with a live example. You'll also find attached to every single session in the comments section, I'm going to provide worksheets for the different key stage levels so that you can actually practice this at home and practice it afterwards so that you can really embed that learning until the place where that you have mastered it and you know this skill really, really well and you can confidently apply this skill every single time. So that's great. So without further ado, let me introduce you to episode number 1. I'd like to get better at summarizing. Now, summarizing is a really, really important skill in reading. And if I could explain it this way, this will probably help you understand it really, really well. I want you to imagine in your mind's eye that you've gone out for a walk and you come across a set of a wood. Now, obviously, the wood is made up of lots and lots of different trees. And within that wood, obviously, there are individual trees. And within those individual trees, you can have branches. Within those individual branches, you're also going to have leaves. Now, when it comes to summarizing, what we're talking about is the ability that you have to be able to see the big picture. In other words, when you read a particular page or a couple of pages, are you able to recall? Are you able to actually state really clearly and carefully and logically what happened over those 2 pages? Can you identify what are the most important points and actually disregard everything else? So for example, when we're looking to summarize, what we're not looking for is we're not looking for the minute detail. We're not looking for all the things about all the different leaves and what was happening in the weather. What we're looking for is the big details, the big picture. The character went for a walk to the wood, and when he was in the wood, something happened which meant that he ran out of the wood. That's the skill of summarizing. It's not all the individual details that went in between that. It's just the most important details. And as a student, it's really important that you're actually able to do this. Because particularly when it comes to GCSE and A level, if you're not able to actually identify what the main points are in a story or what's happening in that extract that they've given you, then often, because you've missed the big picture, you won't really understand how all the different individual pieces fit together. Imagine, for example, to take that example of the wood again, if I just showed you lots of different individual pictures, maybe I showed you an individual picture of a caterpillar, an individual picture of a leaf, an individual picture of a branch, or an individual picture of a piece of bark, or an individual picture maybe of the ground, and maybe even like a river. I'm not sure that you'd be able, just from those individual pictures, to actually be able to piece together that this is a wood that we're looking at. Whereas if you start from the big picture, then often the smaller details fall into place. So that's the skill of summary. And like I say, it is the ability to be able to accurately identify what the main events are in anything that you're reading. But moving on from the explanation, let's have a look right now at a live example. And so the example that I've chosen is from a novel called Whispers in the Graveyard by Teresa Breslin. And this was written in 1994. And the extract that I'm going to read is from chapter 23. And so just listen as I read. Here's what it says. I'm running. My chest is tight and sore. Breath rasping and whistling in my lungs. Branches whip against my face. Brambles tear at my legs and arms. There is a voice screaming out loud, the sound ripping through the trees, screaming and screaming. It's my voice. Amy, Amy. Now I'm at the back dike and the solid wooden fencing has been torn aside, blasted apart as if some careless giant had passed by and trodden on it. I stare at the wood, not splintered or broken, but melted, dissolved and warped, curled aside to make a small space enough for a child to walk through. What could do that? What power is there that would leave that mark? I hesitate, feeling the first great lurch of fear for myself. Amy, I cry out. Beyond me, the gaping dark of the cemetery. There is a soft shudder in my head, a strange flicker which fastens on my fear. Nothing calling for me this time. No whispers in my face tonight. Why? Because Amy is in there. With one child captive, there is no need for two. I hurl myself at the open space and barbed wire comes up to meet me, scratching through my skin, dragging at my clothes to pull me back. The thick bristles are embedded in my jacket and I'm caught fast, struggling on the ground. I unzip the front of my anorak and draw out my arms. I leave it there and crawl forwards to the foot of the dike. Blood on my hands and fingernails as I scramble to the top. Then I jump over and sink down knee deep on the other side, my legs heavy with clogged and slimy liquid. I raise one foot, looking down, expecting to see the thick, viscous mud clinging there. Nothing. Then the next leg. Nothing. But I am sinking, the ground falling away beneath me. I am dropping down, and it will close over my head and suffocate me. Wow, what an incredible extract. But I wonder, as you've just read that with me, can you identify what the main movements in that story were? If you were asked to summarize that in a number of sentences or bullet points, would you be able to do it? Would you know how to summarize it? Let me help you break down this passage so that you can understand this skill of summary. The first thing to do is to try and identify the main features of the story. In other words, what are the things that happen? For me, I often find the best way to do this is to look at the beginning and the end. So let's look at those two again. I'm running. My chest is tight and sore. Breath rasping and whistling in my lungs. Branches whip against my face. Brambles tear at my legs and arms. There is a voice screaming out loud, the sound ripping through the trees, screaming and screaming. Okay, so that's the beginning. Now, what's happening there? So there's lots of things that we don't know. And it's really important, don't focus on the things you don't know. Focus on the things that you do know. So what is it that we do know? We know at the beginning of this story that the narrator, it's in first person, this person is running from something. So we can put that down. We can put the narrator is running from something. Now, another good thing to help us to summarize here is to ask ourselves questions. Things like, well, what's happening and where are we? So the narrator is running from something, and we can also add to that actually it's quite clear that they're in some kind of countryside. It mentions things like brambles, it mentions things like trees. Now we don't know whether it's a wood, we don't know whether it's open landscape, but we do know that they're outside. So we can add that in. The narrator is running from something outside. And it's quite clear that they're scared. Now, then what happens? They hear their voice. Is that something that we could mention? Maybe. But then the next thing that's really apparent is they see a fence. And this fence has been completely destroyed. So we can write that down. The narrator sees a fence completely destroyed. And they can't explain how this has happened. So, we've got two major points. Right at the very beginning, the narrator's running from something, the narrator sees a fence which is completely destroyed, and they just can't explain how this has managed to happen. And then the next major event that takes place is that they seem to reach some kind of wire, and they're trying to climb over it. So, we can then put that down. They reach a barbed wire fence and struggle to get over it. And then the final section, and this is where we look at the end, we notice that the narrator seems to find themselves in a position whereby they feel like they can't keep going. In actual fact, it feels to them as if their legs are stuck in mud, and yet oddly, when they look down, they can't see anything. So once again, how does this story play out? At the very end, we can sort of say the narrator is struggling to move, but there seems to be no reason to explain this. And so when we look at that, we then are able to summarize it in some really clear points. The narrator is running from something at the beginning of this scene, and they're outside. The narrator comes across a fence which has been completely destroyed, and they just can't explain how that's happened. They then reach a barbed wire fence, which they struggle to get over. And then at the very end of the extract, the narrator is struggling even more and seems to be sinking into mud, but there seems to be no rational explanation for why this may be the case. And as the extract closes out, it looks like the narrator is about to die. It's a very thrilling way to actually create a cliffhanger in this story. And as we summarize it, we begin to notice patterns. So you'll notice that a number of different times, there are things that happen that don't seem to have any rational explanation. So if we were to examine this by summarizing this, we can also say that the narrator seems to be confused or unsure or not able to explain what is exactly happening. It's quite clear that the narrator feels like they are being chased by something. We were told right at the very beginning that they're running from something. And it's also quite clear that whatever it is that they're running from, it is going to hurt them so much that actually they keep going, even when they hurt themselves. And at the very end of the extract, the reader is left to wonder, what actually is going to happen to the narrator? How is this going to play out? And by summarizing all of these events together, we're able to see the big picture. We're able to understand what the writer is trying to do here. The writer is trying to create the same sense of fear and the same sense of confusion and the lack of ability to explain that actually this character is feeling themselves. And we as the reader are brought along on that. That then helps the writer as well to create a sense of tension. The reader is left with lots of questions. What are they running from? How close is it to the narrator? And most importantly, will the narrator survive this encounter with whatever it is that's chasing them? As you can see, this is why the skill of summary is so important. Now, I've included a number of different examples down below in the comment section. Maybe you want to give this a go. Maybe you, like me, you want to just bullet point the different events that take place and see if you can summarize them in clear and logical sentences. Or alternatively, and maybe perhaps you're a visual learner, maybe what you would like to do is you want to read through the extract a number of different times and then actually create a series of cartoon boxes where you can draw what are the main events that are taking place in the extract that I've given you. And like I say, keep coming back to the skill. Begin to look through what are the details that you're told that actually you can leave out because they're not really important to you understanding and to being able to summarize what's happening in the extract. Remember, not everything will be important. It's just the main events that you want to focus on. Those main events that are helping create that sense of tension, create the mood or the atmosphere, or helping you to understand what the narrator or the characters are thinking and feeling. That's what the skill of summary allows you to do. Well, I hope that's been really, really helpful. And I hope that's helped you to understand more about the skill of summary. Obviously, download the worksheets, have a go at home. And then in the comment section, get back to us. Let us know, let me know what was it that helped you. Have you actually tried this skill again? Have you tried this more than once? Has it helped you to understand how to summarize and how to identify what's the really important information whilst leaving out the information that when you're summarizing, you don't really need to focus on? Well, it's been great. So loved having you for this first episode in this series that I'm doing, where I'm looking at, I'd like to get better at. And in this episode, we've been looking at, I'd like to get better at the skill of summary. And just to summarize, the skill of summary is about identifying what are the important pieces of information from the text that you're reading. Decide what they are. Focus on the character, focus on the setting, focus on the atmosphere, and then be really brave and confident. Leave out the details that you don't think are that important and see if it can help you gain a really quick and easy understanding of the text that you're reading. Good luck, everyone. Hope to see you next time.